Freddie Mercury, who died last night of AIDS.
When the world woke up to the headline announcing the loss of Freddie at just 45 years old, millions believed they were about to witness a public farewell unlike anything before. Fans gathered at the gates. Cameras stood ready. Flowers flooded the streets. The world expected mourning in the open. What no one imagined was that the farewell had already been locked behind silence. Behind closed doors, something rare was unfolding. Not a spectacle, not a tribute for the world, but a ceremony so controlled, so private, that even many of the people closest to him were never meant to see it. There was a list, a short one, written in advance. 35 names, no media, no exceptions, and one final instruction that overshadowed every other. No one must ever know where I rest. This wasn't just about privacy, it was about erasure, about disappearing on his own terms. The most visible man in music history chose the most invisible goodbye possible. Outside, the world mourned loudly. Inside, silence became law. And the most unsettling part? This silence wasn't chaos. It was planned. Because long before the world said goodbye, he had already decided how completely he would vanish. Before we continue, if you love the stories of Freddie Mercury and Queen and want to help keep his legacy alive, subscribe to this channel. In the final 3 days of his life, nothing was improvised. Every emotion felt unbearable, but every instruction was calm, methodical, and final. Those closest to him later described the atmosphere as surreal. The body was weakening, the voice was fading, but the mind behind the plan was precise. There were sealed documents, clear orders, phone calls that sounded less like goodbyes and more like confirmations. He wasn't preparing to be remembered, he was preparing to be removed. The list of funeral attendees had already been completed. No additions, no debates. Not even the people who assumed they would be there were guaranteed entry. Some famous names were excluded without explanation. Others were included without public justification. The criteria was never social status, it was emotional proximity. Even his bandmates would later admit that parts of the plan shocked them, but no one challenged it. Not out of fear, out of respect. Everyone understood one thing very clearly. If there was ever a time to honor his control, it was now. And then came the most severe order of all. No grave, no shrine, no place for the world to gather. Only one person was chosen to guard that final secret. And that choice changed everything. When news quietly spread that the funeral would be entirely private, disbelief followed almost instantly. Friends, artists, legends, collaborators, people who had walked beside him for decades. Many assumed they would be invited, they were not. Some heard it through whispers, others through silence. No official explanation ever came. The exclusion wasn't accidental, it was intentional, painful, and precise. Why? Because he feared what public grief could become. Not love, but possession. He had spent years watching how people crossed boundaries once vulnerability was exposed. The idea of fans surrounding his final resting place terrified him more than death itself. To him, grief wasn't a performance. It was a private language, and he refused to turn it into another stage. There was also a deeper fear, one that only those closest to him truly understood. He did not want to be remembered as a body, as illness, as decline. He wanted to freeze himself in sound, not in stone. And so the guest list wasn't about who loved him most. It was about who could protect his disappearance. And among all those who loved him, only one person was trusted with the final destination. To the public, Mary was often described as the great love of his early life. To him, she became something far more permanent, the keeper of everything he wanted the world to never touch. He didn't choose her because of the past. He chose her because of trust. In his final instructions, her role was absolute. She would receive the ashes, she would decide the timing. She would carry out the last wish alone. No witnesses, no second opinions, no shared responsibility. Those closest to the situation later admitted something quietly unsettling. Even they did not know where she went after collecting the urn. Days passed. Nothing was said, no records, no confirmations. And when she finally returned, she spoke only one sentence. "It's done." No location was ever shared. Not with the band, not with friends, not with the press. The secret was sealed forever. This wasn't just about hiding a resting place, it was about ensuring that no one, not even history, could claim him physically again. Only his voice would remain public. Everything else vanished. Those who were allowed inside expected something grand, something dramatic, Something fitting for a man who once filled stadiums with light and thunder. What they encountered instead was restraint. No towering flowers, no long speeches, no celebrity arrangements. The ceremony followed ancient spiritual traditions almost no one in the room fully understood. Fire as symbol, purity as passage, silence as respect. To some, the unfamiliarity was shocking. To others, it felt like the truest expression of who he had always been beneath the spectacle. A man who belonged nowhere fully, and everywhere at once. This final ritual wasn't designed to comfort the public. It wasn't even designed to comfort the guests. It was designed to align with something internal, something personal, something unshared. And perhaps that was the point. Even in death, he refused to become predictable. The crowd outside could hear nothing, no music, no cheering, only distant echoes they could not interpret. The separation between inside and outside was complete. But what shocked those inside most wasn't the ceremony. It was what didn't play. There were no triumphant anthems, no thunderous choruses, none of the songs the world expected to accompany his farewell. Instead, the room filled with voices that spoke of surrender, companionship, and quiet faith. Music not designed to shake buildings, but to soften grief. Those present would later describe the contrast as overwhelming. The man who once stood at the center of controlled chaos chose to leave in controlled stillness. One piece of music in particular left many shaken. It wasn't famous, it wasn't widely known. It was something personal, something that felt more like a confession than a performance. And then there was the quiet rumor. After the official ceremony ended, after most had already begun to leave, a faint voice was allegedly heard one last time, humming. Not singing, just humming. No one could identify the melody. The tape, if it ever existed, has never surfaced. Some believe it was unfinished. Some believe it was intentionally left incomplete. A final thread that was never meant to be tied. And maybe that was the last message. Not resolution, but mystery. The cremation followed tradition, quietly, without public record, without announcement, without acknowledgement. And then, the ashes disappeared. Only one person collected them. Only one person transported them. Only one person knew the route, the timing, and the destination. Weeks turned into months. Rumors multiplied. Some said the ashes were placed beneath a tree that had personal meaning. Others believed they were scattered somewhere tied to origin, not fame. Some whispered international locations. Some whispered secrecy for protection. None were ever confirmed. What made the disappearance more unsettling was that even the band accepted not knowing. No pressure, no confrontation, no demands. His final boundary was honored. To the world, this meant one thing. There would never be a grave to stand before. No coordinates for mourning. No physical place to anchor the loss. Only memory. Only sound. Only absence. Many misinterpreted his secrecy as humility. Others saw it as control. The truth lived somewhere between fear and preservation. He had lived under constant invasion. Walls climbed, gates chased, privacy stolen again and again. Even kindness often arrived uninvited. The idea of that invasion continuing after death horrified him. He did not want pilgrims. He did not want artifacts. He did not want his body to become a destination. Because to him, love was not something that should require proximity to flesh. It should live in memory, in art, in air. He had always been generous with the version of himself he wanted to share, but the physical self was always fiercely protected. The silence surrounding his farewell was not weakness. It was the final act of ownership. Even the cameras were refused, and that decision still shapes how history remembers not his death, but his life. Shortly before the end, Mary received a sealed envelope. Not legal paperwork, not instructions, a letter. Only one rule accompanied it. Open this after everything is over. She never shared its contents, not with friends, not with journalists, not with history. When asked years later if she would ever reveal it, her answer was simple: no. Because then the secret would stop being a promise. The world has speculated endlessly. Some believe it contained emotional confessions. Others think it referenced what must never be found. And some believe it held words meant only for one person, finally said without audience. Whatever was written inside that envelope died with her silence. And perhaps that was the point. Because for a man who spent his life in front of millions, his final words did not belong to the world. His funeral was not famous because it was hidden. It was hidden because it was famous. Every absence was intentional. Every silence was deliberate. Every unknown remains protected to this day. There is no statue marking his end, no public tomb, no final photograph, no documentary footage of farewell. And yet, he is everywhere, in every opening piano chord, in every stadium chorus, in every voice that breaks while singing his songs decades later. He disappeared physically, so his presence could never be limited to place. And perhaps that is the greatest paradox of all. By refusing to be seen one last time, he became impossible to forget. If this hidden farewell changed the way you see Freddie's final goodbye, if this silence feels louder now than any headline ever could, subscribe to the channel so these untold stories continue to live. Like the video to honor a legacy that refused to be ordinary, and leave your comment below. Should legends be remembered in stone or in sound?